What's up, folks? This is Vargo with Vargo Beats, back at it again with another YouTube tutorial for hip hop producers. And what I'm going to be doing over the next few videos, and what I'm going to be focusing on this video, is something very important if you are a hip hop producer, most especially if you're selling beats in the online sphere. And that is going to be, how do we mix our kick and our 808 within the context of the overall mix? The kick in the 808 is generally what drives your beat in any hip hop song. And you could use a variety of different sounds for this. Some people love their 808, some people love their bass guitars, e-bass, whatever you're using for your beat. It doesn't necessarily matter. But if you're an online producer and you're trying to sell your beats within the online sphere, things have gotten so competitive that if you aren't a great mixer or you don't have a great mixer on your team, it's going to be really difficult to market your beats and sell them to artists. The truth is, your beats need to be mixed whenever they are sold online on whatever platform you're selling them on. And even though they would come tracked out to the artists if they buy exclusive rights, if they're not mixed effectively in the beginning, you're going to have a really hard time selling them to artists to begin with. So there are a few different ways to do this. I'm going to be going over the most simple method today, which is going to be a very simple EQ on both the kick and the 808 to carve out some frequencies to where your bass sits below the kick. There are more difficult ways to do this, or more advanced ways to do this, including like side chaining, which is something I will go over in the future. But to start, I want to cover some of the fundamentals and some of the basics, and how you would mix these within the overall mix. So really quickly, why should you listen to me, some random guy on YouTube? I've been producing professionally for about 10 years. Producing, semi-professionally for about 15, which sounds, crazy to me, but I guess I'm getting old at this point. I have worked with a number of record labels over the years, most specifically a label that had distribution through Capitol Records. So I've been able to meet a lot of, incredible artists and incredible producers during my time with various labels. I've produced industry tracks for Gucci Mane, among other industry artists. And sort of my wheelhouse over the years has been creating loops and selling them to mainstream producers. So, in the industry, we call that co-production. Call it whatever you want. That's been sort of what I do. But even in order to do that, I need to be able to mix my kicks and 808s effectively. So I have put together a very simple loop within FL Studio. And what I'm going to do is show you the loop, how the just stock sounds sit within the mix. And then I'm going to show you using very simple stock plugins, which is going to be your parametric EQ within Fruity Loops, and how to carve out some frequencies and very simply make the kick sit on top of the 808. So I will share my screen with you now, and let's get started. All right, cool. So what we've got here is, like I said before, a very, very simple mix within Fruity Loops. Basically what I've done is I've used, like I said before, stock plugins. So for example, here I'm using the Flex plugin. I'm almost positive that comes with most versions of Fruity Loops. Now I have used some third-party sounds, because you kind of have to make good beats within FL. So I'll go ahead and play this for you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate the kick and the 808. I'm going to show you how that sits in the mix. And then I'm going to show you kind of a very simple method to make it sit kind of pretty. So let's listen. Okay, so pretty simple. Basically, just I have a loop here that I've used, a third-party loop, and sound within Flex, and then some overall drum sounds. So at this point in time, most especially if you've been producing for a while, you can kind of hear that the kick and the 808 are lacking a bit, and they're both good sounds, and I'll play them here for you here in just a second. But they're lacking in the sense that they don't cut through the mix. It doesn't sound powerful. There's no real thump to it. And if you were to play this on, any sort of, system, most especially in your car, it would just feel a little bit dead. So let me go ahead and isolate these sounds for you. The kick and the 808. So what we've got here is a fairly deep, kind of generic 808, to be honest with you. And we've got a kick that doesn't sit on top of the 808. And that's what we want within the overall context of the mix, right? So we want our kicks to thump and we want the 808s to kind of be below it, if you could visualize that, to create an overall deep sound, right? So I'll play the kick for you specifically. And it's fine. It's a good kick. So it's a good kick, and we have a good 808, but why are they not cutting through the mix? Generally speaking, whenever you have a kick and 808 that don't cut through the mix, it's going to be because there are some frequencies that are clashing, right? And if we don't EQ those frequencies and we don't cut a little bit from the 808, then we're going to run into the same problem that we're running into now. So I'm going to like unsolo this, play it all together again so you can get a good feel for what the mix sounds like at first, and then we'll start going through some of the steps necessary to fix this sound. Okay. So what I'm going to do first is open up, well, first and foremost, all of your sounds should be assigned to a mixer track to begin with, and this is how you do this specifically. So I have my kick on mixer track 1, and I have my 808 on mixer track 5. So I'm going to go ahead and open these up now. As you can see, in mixer track 1, there are no plugins that are being used. I'm not using any EQ. I'm not using any compression. So using basic Fruity Loops plugins, I'm going to open up the parametric EQ2, which is a visual equalizer, which is what I generally like to use. Now, keep in mind, I'm doing this on Fruity Loops. You could do this on literally any software that you're making beats on. All you would need is, of course, your beat and a visual EQ of some sort. You can do it without a visual EQ. It just makes it a lot harder. So whenever I play the loop, what you're going to see is certain frequencies coming through stronger and weaker within the EQ, and I'll show you here. Okay. So what I'm seeing is the meat of the kick is coming through around the 45 to 55 hertz range, as you can see here. That's the meat of the kick. And then we do have some frequencies that run the spectrum. The higher frequencies are not necessarily going to be necessary. I'm not going to cut those in this tutorial because, it would, kind of just waste some of the time that we have here. But what I'm going to do is you can actually isolate these frequencies and raise them to see what that sounds like in the context of the mix. And I'll do that now. And you can see that's kind of where the meat of the kick comes through. So I'm going to solo this and go back to my EQ and kind of show you what you can do here to, even if you're not great at visualizing and seeing where the frequencies are coming through, you can kind of play with this to see where it sounds good, where it doesn't, and what you should probably raise and what part of the kick you want to really shine through the mix. In this range, you get a lot of really just noise. And now you're getting to more of the high end of the kick here. So still don't kind of want these frequencies to shine through. And we're getting closer. As you can kind of see, generally speaking, with a hip hop kick or any kick, really for that matter, you're going to have sort of a low end of the kick and a high end of the kick. Generally speaking, and of course this will depend on the kick and the 808 that you're using. A good way to EQ and make the kick shine through is to raise frequencies in the high end of the kick, and then cut frequencies in that same range of your 808. So I'm going to choose around this 90 hertz mark to raise some frequencies here. Now, generally speaking, I don't want to raise them above sort of the 5 to 6 decibel range. And here I'm going to put it at around 2 decibels raised. But as you can see here, the Q is not where I want it to be, right? So I'm raising too much of these other frequencies. I want to kind of isolate around that 90 frequency range. So what you can do here, you can see my mouse. Here you have a way to control which, the frequency range. So I'm going to put that at 90 like it was before. And down below it, you have what's called your Q. And what this is going to do is either isolate frequencies, as you can see here, or broaden the frequency range that you want to raise or lower. So because I want to isolate around that 90 hertz range, what I'm going to do is bring this Q down. As you can see, that makes the hill skinnier. I don't want to isolate this much necessarily, but I do want to isolate around that 90 hertz range. So I'm going to put it about right there at about 6%, raising about 2 decibels. And it doesn't look like much, most especially if you're not used to EQing your kicks. But this can really make a huge difference. So I'm going to go ahead and play the kick for you now and see if we can notice the difference between the two sounds. See, when I put it back to normal, it sounds almost dead. And that's going to get a little bit of that high end of the kick shining through the mix a bit more. And of course, you can't hear it because we don't have the other instruments playing. But now I'm going to play it with the 808. And then what I'm going to do, a general rule of thumb, if you raise a frequency, especially on the high end of a kick, you're going to want to cut that same frequency in the 808. So I'm going to play them together. You can already hear the kick sort of shining through, but that's not going to be enough necessarily within the mix, or at least not to my taste. So what I'm going to do next is open up the 808's plugins here, and as you can see, there's nothing here as of yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the exact same plugin, the exact same EQ, and without even looking at the frequency range at this point, I know because I raised the kick at 90 hertz, I'm going to want to dip the 808 in that same range. And what that's going to do is carve out frequencies within the 808 for the kick to shine through, right? Because you don't want your two instruments fighting for space in that range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this number 4, I'm going to pull it all the way down to 90 hertz, or roundabout. I don't know if I can get it there. There we go. At 90 hertz, and then I'm going to dip that down about the same much as I raised the kick, or about the same level as I raised the kick, which is going to be about 3 decibels there. And as you can see, this is too broad. So what I'm going to want to do is lower the Q to isolate that. I'm going to put it at about 6 or 7%, just like I did with the kick. And then I'm going to play those together to see how they sound. Okay, so it's hard to hear now, although you can hear a difference. It's hard to hear now what that's going to do within the overall mix. But trust me, if you follow this formula, it's going to really help your kicks shine through, most especially if you're using a kick that sounds a little weak within the mix. So that's going to be the first step. So I'm going to play this within the context of the mix again, and we're going to see how it sounds. Okay, so very simple, but I want to do a little bit more with these two drum sounds. So I'm going to go back to the kicks EQ. So here on track 1, I'm going to open up this EQ again, and what I want to do is I've raised the high end of the kick, but also from this kick specifically, it's got a very, very nice meaty thump at the low end. And that's going to do wonders, most especially if you're listening in your car or people listening on headphones. So I want to raise that as well. And I'm also going to raise the 808 in that range. And the reason I can do that with that frequency range and not with this 90 hertz frequency range is because the meat of the kick is at a lower frequency than the meat of the 808. So I'm going to raise some of the meat of this kick down here around the, maybe 42 hertz range, 40, 42 hertz. So I'm going to pull down number 3 to about 40 hertz. And I'm going to raise this. I'm going to just kind of show you how this sounds. Okay, so even within the context of the mix now, even without isolating and lowering my Q, the kick already sounds more lively. It has a lot more thump, and it's going to sound much better within the context of the mix. So I'm going to take this same band here, and I'm going to isolate around that 40 hertz range because I don't want to raise everything down here because it can, sound muddled at that point. Then I'm going to isolate that, and then I'm going to go to my 808 here on number 5. Open that up, and I'm also going to raise that just a slight bit because I do want a little bit of that 808's lower frequencies to come through as well. And it's not necessarily going to clash, like I said before, because the meat of the 808 is at a little bit of a higher range, but I do want to raise that. So I'm going to do the same thing here, bring it down to about 46, 47 hertz, which is kind of the meat of the 808. And I'm going to raise that as well, just a tad, maybe 2 decibels. And isolate just a bit. And let's listen to how that sounds within the context of the mix. Okay. So it's very subtle, but you could definitely hear a difference. And what I'm going to do is isolate these 2 sounds again, play them for you with and without the EQ. And I'm going to do the same thing within the context of the mix. And we're going to just listen to the difference with just a very simple EQ process here. Let me go ahead and isolate the kick in the 808. Okay. So now I'm going to disable the EQ on both, and we're just going to listen to the difference. See how weak it sounds? And now I'm going to bring them both back in. Okay, so subtle but noticeable difference. And these simple steps can make all the difference in the world, most especially if you're not familiar with side chaining or compression or any of the other, plethora of ways that you could bring out your kick in your 808. So I'll play it within the context of the mix one more time just to show you how it sounds. So I'll start with it disabled, and then I will just bring them in as the mix or as the loop progresses. Okay, so very, very simple, very, very easy way to do this, even if you're not super familiar with EQ or compression. So that's going to do it for this video. Now, in the future, I will be expanding on this and showing you compression and side chaining and the number of other ways that you can do this that will be even more effective. But for now, we're just going to leave it here. So if you've enjoyed this video, if you're interested in seeing videos like this in the future, I'd be really appreciated if you could like and subscribe to the channel and turn on alerts so you can know whenever a new video comes out. Really looking forward to helping some online producers and sort of pay it forward. I'm not selling anything here. I don't have a website. I don't have anything to to pitch you in the end. So I am doing this for fun and because I have a lot of time on my hand with COVID. So this is kind of what I'm doing at this point. So, please like and subscribe. I am fairly new here on YouTube. So if you see any issues with, like video or sound, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. In addition to that, if you have specific things that you want me to do tutorials on that you're having issues with, or you would just like to learn more about, please don't hesitate to leave that in the comments section as well. So again, I appreciate you stopping by. I will be releasing more videos in the future, and let's get it.